I want to make us big, but then
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. We are live, Rachel.
yeah, it kind of caught us off guard. We were busy talking, and then we looked at the clock, and boom.
Well, today we're going to talk about we're kind of going back to basics. We've been kind of in the weeds a little bit, to going deeper diving on stuff for a long time. It's fresh new year. It's our first podcast of the year. And, we think this would be a good time to kind of go back and kind of cover the basics on things because it's real easy to kind of get beyond that. And we're going to talk
Yeah,
about gardening, just getting started gardening, and just all the basics of that. Because maybe you're new to it and it's overwhelming to some people, to get started. And we just want to talk about how it doesn't really have to be overwhelming. There are a lot of options, there are a lot of things to consider, but it can be as complicated as you want it to be, or it can
yes.
be super, super simple. And I think we'll probably get into the little bit more of the complicated things to consider today. But in the end, it can be as simple as just turning up some soil and planting some plants in it. It can really be that simple. But we'll get into that here in a few. How's it going, Rachel? How's things at the homestead?
Well,
Homesteads.
yeah. Speaking of starting new gardens, that's my whole life. I mean, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm starting from scratch, starting completely over with uh, raw soil and everything else. But we are finally moving in.
Yeah, I seen a picture. You had your basement kind of getting put together there. That looked pretty cool.
Yeah, we bought a bunch of those black totes with the yellow lid, and of course we're moving in the middle of winter. We weren't supposed to be, but so we're moving in the middle of winter, and our trailer does not have. It's not an enclosed trailer. It's just a open trailer. So we bought a bunch of those
How's
those
the
totes.
how's the weather been up there for the move? Is it you getting lots of snow right now? Really cold or?
It's pretty cold. It's been cold. It's usually pretty cold in January, and we thankfully we did not. So we have probably about 4 to 5 feet of accumulation since the winter started, but it's all
Mhm.
melted, except for maybe like I think we have. I don't know. It's hard to say. It kind of compacts over the year, go over the year. So right now on the ground is probably I don't know, maybe a foot of snow, which isn't really that much. Usually we have a lot more. So
Yeah, we
we have
we have
been
about 7 or 8
driving.
inches here right now. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been driving around the house to the basement and putting stuff in, which has been very, very helpful that we've been able to do that because most of the time we probably wouldn't be able to do that. So yeah, yeah, it's fun working and moving and packing. We're a little tired.
I've lived in the, same house for 32 years, so I can't even remember what it's like to move, and I don't really want to.
I can't imagine because we've been here 18 years and it's hard to go through stuff and it needed to be done, but yeah. And with homesteading, there's a lot of stuff. We have a lot of hobbies, homesteading and
Mhm.
hunting and fishing and you know, there's just stuff you can't get rid of. So you just have to move it.
Right.
Yep.
Well, I mean, it's definitely gonna be a new beginning for you in a lot of ways. I mean, it's what we're talking about today, even starting a new, kind of your first vegetable gardens at the new place. I mean, really, I mean,
Yeah.
you're gonna be starting over there and, um, yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but it's also an adventure and fun, and
It
I think
is.
it's kinda
I'm
exciting.
I'm excited to experiment. I mean, we were talking about before we were on here about how I might do some different experiments with different types of gardening and bedding and see what works because it's very different soil than we have here. Um, we have a different water source. Right now we water from a mucky large lake, which I know is part of why our garden does so well because it's getting all of that fish poop and everything all the time and we won't have that anymore. So, it's a different ball game.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know, it's gonna be new, like I said, your soil's different,
Mhm.
everything's different, but yeah, you're gonna have a lot of fun experimenting and relearning a lot of things, and no
Yeah.
doubt, probably be a little frustrating too at times because you'll remember what you had versus what you have gonna have, and
Yeah. Yeah, I have beautiful black soil here now.
it took a while though, probably, didn't it?
I'm tempted to fill those black totes up with my soil and dump them out.
Your old place looks like a big hole where
Yeah, yeah.
it
Uh,
was.
what happened there? I don't know what happened, you know,
They
we just
repoed our lawn. Oh, man. Anyway, yeah, around here, it's just survival. I've been, sick with the, dreaded C word for, a few
Yeah,
days, and, it's the first time I've ever had it in all these years of it being going around. I've never caught it, and,
that still
I
blows my mind.
I caught it really good, and there was about 4 or 5 days of it that I didn't care about anything ever again. I just wanted to go away. It was bad. It was really, really bad, and I'm better now, but I'm still a little bit down. I mean, it's been a rough few days, and, we haven't of course, we didn't do a podcast the last couple of weeks, but it was the holidays. It kinda worked out well because, when we're doing the podcast, it landed right on the holidays. So,
Right,
it
yes.
worked out well that we skipped a couple, but, oh, I'll tell you, I wouldn't have been doing one even if it hadn't, been that way because I was down, and I was down hard. So,
Yeah, it's a bugger, it's not fun.
yeah, I didn't care anything about homesteading or podcasting or anything for a few days. I cared about survival.
Sleep, walk from
Yeah,
the couch to the bed.
it was bad. It was so bad. But I'm definitely on the upswing now and starting to feel a bit better. Hopefully, it keeps going in that direction because I don't want to experience any more of this.
Yeah, I'm glad you're feeling better.
And hopefully, I can get through this without coughing as I'm gonna. Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying, you said it, so that happened, but you got cough drops, water, and the cough button.
I got some water here, yeah, so I'm trying to hold it back. But yeah, I think, right now, as far as homesteading, it's microgreens. I mean, it's pretty much about the only thing I've got going on right now just because I don't feel like doing anything else right now, but I do have some, but I am using my old plastic microgreens because I
I
haven't broke
know.
out
I was gonna ask you to show
these
these.
nice stainless steel ones that you recommended. We did a Christmas podcast, Christmas tip,
Yes.
things you could buy for Christmas a few weeks ago, and you talked
I'm
about
excited to
these.
see those and what
Yeah,
you think of them.
yeah, they're pretty nice. I mean, I think they'll last forever. I mean, and that's what I like about them. I mean, they're not gonna go
Yeah,
bad or anything.
exactly.
I like that you throw them in the dishwasher or whatever, and wash them when, in between uses or whatever. I mean, I think they're gonna work great. I think they're gonna work just great. So I'm excited about using those because those plastic ones, I have several of them, and a bunch of them have just sun cracked and have busted, and they just get, how plastic is. After a while, it just gets brittle.
Yeah.
Even if you just got it sitting in a window, it just gets brittle. And a lot of them have gotten brittle and cracked and busted. And I've had to throw them away. So I was ready for some new ones, and no doubt those were a little expensive.
Yes.
But I also think they'll last forever. I mean, really, if I take care of them. So I'm excited about doing some microgreens in those. Probably this week, I'll probably start some of those. So
How fun.
yeah, so that's
I'm missing that. I usually have my indoor garden and microgreens growing and sprouts growing right now, but everything's chaos right
yeah.
now.
With your move, it's just it's crazy for you right now. And with me
So
being
none of
sick, I
that's
even feel like it.
happening. None of that's
Yeah.
happening.
I know I went in the greenhouse today for the first time in about 4 weeks, and I thought, "I really need to get some stuff going on out here." But I haven't felt like it, but I think as I'm, starting to feel a little bit better here, I think I'll get back on track pretty soon, so and this I started getting excited in January, I do. I mean, it's like I'm starting to think about the upcoming garden. I'm starting to think about getting some seeds started real soon. I mean, I'd probably start onion seeds here in the next couple weeks,
Did your
you
seed
know?
catalog start pouring in? Mine did.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I've got
yeah, they're
a
so tempting.
territorial sitting right there and a couple others, yeah. I've
Yeah,
got
they're
some.
so tempting. I
Yeah.
sprung for the Baker Creek, the bigger catalog this year. I paid the
Mm,
money to get the bigger one. They're always so beautiful.
yeah. Yeah, they make, like, little
Mhm.
coffee table, books there you can flip through when you're sitting
Yeah,
there
I mean,
bored.
for those watching, if you watch this online, I mean, they have the one that they mail out and it's like that thick, and then they have the one that you pay for and it's like that
Yeah,
thick.
it's like 4 or 5 times more stuff in
Yeah.
it. And yeah, it's really a
Beautiful
it's
color photos and
mhm,
recipes and yeah.
and every seed you can imagine.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
everything. I mean, just it's loaded. Yeah,
Very
it's good
tempting.
stuff. I
I
love I mean, I love the pictures. I love to just sit there and dream about, looking at different stuff that you don't grow. And I think Johnny's catalog is a lot like because I love the pictures. They do a
Yes.
really good job with pictures too. Some of them just do a really good job with the pictures and
Mhm.
make you dream and get you to spend that money that you don't really wanna spend, but
Yeah, yeah.
I luckily I saved a lot of seeds this year. I got a lot of onion seeds that I can start that I collected, and there's a couple other things I'll start in into January, probably early February, and get those going. So yeah,
What kind of
hallelujah.
onions did you save seeds from?
Remember, I don't remember the types. I just whatever I was growing last year. I can't remember what they were now.
Okay.
I actually I everything that I've grown, I've gotten like the feed store onions. I have never ordered any onions from a catalog. I've always
Really?
just went to the feed store and bought them and planted them and had some pretty good luck from them.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'll grow some there's white ones and red ones and yellow ones. I'll have all
Yeah.
3, and I just, I plant them all together. But honestly, I have so many of those walking onions, I probably wouldn't even have to do anything.
Yeah, those get prolific, and I've found that if you thin them, the bulbs do get bigger.
I literally skipped planting garlic this year just because I have so much left over. And I mean, I have some in the guilds growing
Right?
just to have
Yeah.
some variety in the guilds, but I didn't plant any. I just let it go what I had out there, and I just have so much stored up that I didn't use. I was like, I'm not even going to plant garlic this year. I'm just going to use those beds for some other things.
Nice.
So, I
Nice.
mean, which I hate because I love having garlic early. It just looks cool to have it early on in the spring and to
Yes,
get
it's
your
one of the first
scapes and
things to
all
pop
that.
up. Yes.
Yeah, it's cool to have it because you can fill a bed up. But it's so easy to grow, and so I enjoy
Yeah.
growing it. But I was like, I just don't need it, and I could use those beds for other things. So I think I'm gonna just grow potatoes in them where I normally grow garlic.
Potatoes are, that's my number one request from my kids to grow,
Hmm.
potatoes. They
Yeah,
always get
yeah.
it. They're like, "Potatoes, there's nothing like a fresh potato."
Yeah. I don't grow enough potato I need to grow more potatoes because it's just something it's a staple in our house, and I
Mhm.
it's something I really need to be growing more of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're really not too hard to grow. So, yeah.
We're being asked a question, ever thought about doing a seed exchange within your groups? Uh, the yeah, I mean, definitely it'd all have to be done by mail because everybody's scattered all over the place in our groups. It's not really local. But yeah, I think we've even mentioned it a few times if anybody
I think
has any
we have
seeds.
with I think
I
it would
think
be fun.
I think in a while back, I think maybe we did a little bit of one where people were doing some seed swapping and stuff. And we've done, I mean, I've sent comfrey to people and
Right.
people have sent me seeds, and we've definitely had some exchanges, small scale in there.
Yeah,
But yeah,
when we went to the Homestead conference, we had a massive seed
yeah,
exchange.
yeah. Jordy brought down a bunch of stuff. You had a bunch of stuff. I had a few things, but yeah, we
Yeah,
were
Jordy
gathering it
put
up.
a picture in the homestead front porch of the butternut squash that I
Mm.
seed
He
I
had
gave him, and apparently it was quite productive.
Yes, he had quite a harvest there, didn't he? It was looked
I think
good.
that might be Walthrop, but I can't my memory is terrible.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. I think that's what I usually grow. I think.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose we should probably jump into our topic here about getting started gardening. A lot of folks, maybe this is your first year, maybe second year, maybe just early on in gardening. Maybe you're moving, you're starting a new garden. And, it's like you want to consider, what are the things you need to consider in starting a garden? How do you get started? And I think, personally, I think evaluating your property is the place to start.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
one thing a garden definitely requires is some sunlight. Sunlight's key. Stuff don't grow without sun. So they need plenty of sunlight. You need 6 hours minimum for most things, and 8 is
Yeah.
better, um, of direct sunlight. You can get by on some things like some leafy greens, lettuces, things like that in less sunlight, but anything fruiting is really gonna require that 6 to 8 minimum, and it's gonna do better with probably the 8. Um, and a lot of people I think make the mistake of walking out in their garden or they're going to plant a garden in the middle of the day and saying, "Oh, I get plenty of sunlight here."
Yeah.
Track it because there's portions of that. If there's a building or a tree off to the side, somewhere, it may not get. You really need to know at the extreme ends of that garden what they're getting because it may not get that much. Um, I mean, I've done that. I mean, I know that I thought, well, I just didn't measure it, didn't think about it. I thought, well, I think I get plenty of sunlight there. And then what you realize later is, well, that building was kind of shading it for the first 4 hours of the day. And then this tree over here is shading it the last 4 hours of the day. And, you're only getting 5 hours sunlight in the middle of the day, on that garden.
Right.
So it's some things to consider for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing we talked about too was your access to water. So if you live in a drier climate, or you have like Harold and I had last couple of years was a drought,
Mhm.
um, you're going to want to be able to access water. So whatever that source is, whether it's pumping from a pond or from your personal well, make sure that you have some access to water, or you're going to have to create some barrels or something to be able to water.
Unless you're just really, really fortunate. I mean, I got by for years without doing anything just because we had
Yeah.
several years there where it was just the rainfall was just about perfect, and I live in a place that normally is pretty good,
Normally
it's
it
just
is here too.
yeah, and I mean, it's just not I mean, there's been many years maybe I only had to water the garden with a hose 2 or 3 times the entire year. And that's reasonable. You're fine with that. But then, like you said, a couple years of drought where you're out there every week watering.
Yes.
I have lots of water collection, and I'd run it out in a couple weeks, and then you're going several weeks where I'm on city water. So you're having to use city water to water a garden, which is not the best thing for your garden. It certainly likes it better than no water, but it's hard on it, and hard on a water bill too if you're on city water. And you know, it is something to consider.
Yeah.
Definitely putting in some rain barrel setups and plenty of it. I mean, I expand every year and add more just because I have discovered that it's like you can
That
never
you
have
need it.
enough,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
and the other thing to consider too is if you watching where water goes. So you don't want to be planting in an
Mhm.
area where you're going to end up with you get a rainstorm and it totally floods every time you get a rainstorm. So just observing your land where the high spots and low spots are, and making sure that you're not putting it in a big huge puddle and drowning
Yeah,
whatever is.
and, in the more advanced thinking, I mean, we're talking again, beginner, getting a
Yeah.
garden started, taking what you have. I mean, definitely on down the road, you can put in some swells and you can try to hold that water back. And there's so many things you can do to, conserve your water and slow it down from running off your property and things and letting the ground really absorb it. But again, we're talking beginning here. What's the
Yeah.
easiest thing you can do to get started? Because it can be overwhelming to consider too many things. So we're not going to get too into that stuff, but definitely you're going to have to consider: are you able to water that garden? Are you
Yep.
getting plenty of sunlight? You also wanted to consider soil quality. Um, is if you're going to plant in the ground, what's your soil like? There's some things to consider. I mean, obviously the soil texture, the
Yeah.
loamy soil is a good mixture of sand and clay and silt, and that's a good garden soil. Obviously, a lot of places like you're up there in Michigan, you have a lot of sand. Some places have a lot of clay.
Or
Our soil's
both.
pretty good here, or both. Yeah, just different places. Um, so obviously you don't need to know what you have and what you have to work with, what you need to add to it to kind of get it better. Um, uh, and if it's just so out of whack that it's going to take years to get it right, maybe raised beds are the way to go and bring in the soil. I mean, these are things to consider, but you want to test your soil for a few things. I mean, it's nice if you could do a full soil test to know where you're at on your minerals and if there's any contaminations or anything like that in your soil. But you also need to know about your pH, and that's really
Right.
simple. But vegetables like between 6 and 7, close, around 7, 6.5 is really good. Um, and they'll grow good, but it's a lot of places, it's higher or lower than that, and it can
Yeah.
really affect your growth and
Yep.
what you're growing. Some plants
Yeah,
just
and
like
you can
differences.
it's super easy to find that out. You can either mail something to the extension, or there's even home kits for pH. It's
Mhm.
pretty pH is pretty simple. So, yep.
Yeah, yeah. And again, running a full soil test isn't that complicated either, but you at least need to know your soil structure and your soil pH at the very least when you're getting
Well, and
started.
extensions are super, super helpful. If you
Mhm.
wanna go that way, they will give you lots of information. So, yeah.
It's also good to think about like wind and exposure too, because like for example, this year or this last year, I guess now, um, I had all my corn get laid down by a windstorm.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you can get like a wind blocked row of trees, 30, 40 yards away or something. I mean, just something that isn't going to block the sunlight, but can block the wind from coming in from, say, if you have a lot of, wind that comes in from the west normally
Yeah.
here, then if you had a nice row of trees or something there blocking that wind, protecting your garden, it can really be helpful.
Yeah, it will just really depend on where you're at. So I
Yeah.
have a lot of trees, so it's less likely to happen, but we do get tunnels of wind. But there's
Mhm.
people that live, if you live a little bit further south, some of those people, it's pretty flat there, and the wind tends to
Mhm.
howl across people's land. One
It
of the
can.
things I would personally consider too is having it closer to your house. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So if you have a piece of property
Yeah.
that's not tiny like what we both have right now, it's out of sight, out of mind if it's too
Yeah.
far from your house.
A
So,
accessibility and convenience are really
mhm,
important, and
yeah,
because I if you don't ever see it, you're not gonna weed it, you're not gonna water it, you're not gonna think
yeah,
about it, you're gonna go days and days and days, and it don't take but a few days and days and days, and it's out of
yeah,
control, and,
right.
so I think about that, you think about your zones, what we call permaculture zones, and what you're gonna, keep it in a zone that's you're gonna frequent often, but also just having accessibility to it too, putting in pathways, I find that so helpful. If you're just going to have this garden, this big giant garden and just rows, and it's real inconvenient to walk between the rows and get to things,
Yeah,
it's going to affect you. I like to put pathways between and break my garden beds up in sections and have pathways around them, is what I
yeah.
like to do. That isn't required. It definitely can waste a lot of space
It
doing
can.
that.
It can.
But I also find it so much easier that I make better use of the space that I do have when I do that because it's more convenient. So it's really I think I love having pathways. I mean, I just think it's,
I
especially
like it
when
too
you can pull a wagon down.
for ease of getting tools in, like your wheelbarrow and stuff like
Mhm.
that. It's very nice to have paths in for that because I've made the mistake of not having wide enough paths, and it is such a pain
Yeah,
even for harvesting, for weeding, for a lot of reasons. It's just a little bit easier to have paths.
absolutely. And when it comes to space considerations and stuff, and you might think, well, I don't want to waste my space on that. I'm telling you that a well-tended garden can be so much more productive than a
Mhm.
large, poorly maintained garden.
Yes.
It just can. So,
100%.
the accessibility is just makes all the difference, and, you know, if space is really limited, you can definitely get your raised beds and containers going, and, you can do a lot in those, and, because even if you don't have a lot of yard, you may I mean, I've honestly seen raised beds put on driveways,
Yes.
full gardens on a
I have to.
driveway, and
There's
it works
a
great.
there's a video that I put in the show notes at the bottom, and it was purely just for I put inspirational because that's what they did. It was a
Mhm.
in-town garden where people use containers, and um, it was because it was on concrete.
Yeah, parking
And
lots and
it
things.
was you wouldn't even know it though by when you were watching the video. You wouldn't even know that it was on concrete.
Yeah. Well,
So,
it's like you
yeah,
could think about like rooftop gardens and things in these big
yeah,
cities and stuff. I mean, it's all raised beds and containers and things, and they're very productive. I've seen some of those that are just
yeah.
extremely productive.
Well, and you can also use the edge, like we've talked about before in podcasts,
Mhm.
but you can also grow vertically.
Yes.
So,
And,
yeah,
and you bring up the edge again when you're putting in a lot of pathways. That's a lot more edge,
yeah, yeah.
obviously, and things do great on the edge. Again, it's a permaculture concept, but it may be a little more advanced than what people think of just beginning their garden. But it's amazing when you've got access to that edge everywhere. It's amazing how much more productive it can be by having that. You mentioned a few in the notes here. You've mentioned a few methods, and yeah, we can talk about a few of those methods for gardening. Of course, we're talking about either ground or raised bed, but in the
Yes.
ground, even there's several kinds of methods for growing a garden. And again, we don't
Yeah.
want to overwhelm you, but we should mention them.
Well, the
Go
reason
ahead.
I'm mentioning them is because you can go watch on YouTube and then make the decision what you think would work best for
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
because of your area, your soil, your options. So, one of them I talked about was a grow biointensive method. That one is pretty it's used in third world countries where people have access to nothing. That said, it is labor intensive, that method is. So,
Yeah.
you give up, and it's a low financial input, but you're putting tons of sweat into that one.
Yeah.
So I probably wouldn't recommend it for most people, but I thought I would mention it.
Yeah, because it involves double digging with a shovel. I mean, you're literally
Yes.
tilling your garden with a shovel, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's deep too. Their
Yeah.
suggestions for double digging is pretty deep. And then you grow your own, you just grow a lot of compost crops and stuff like that. But it's like I said, it's designed for third world countries where they have access to nothing.
Right.
So, the next one I posted, which is one of my favorite methods, is the no-till. And of course, I mentioned Jesse Frost because he has a fantastic book, but he also has a really good YouTube channel. And he has a couple the YouTube channel, or the exact video that I linked to is one where he talks about the three different methods. And one of the methods that he talks about is just literally using your tiller. And a lot of people will start with tilling and then convert over to no-till because of the condition of their soil. So he talks about that in these videos. But you and I both prefer the no-till method.
Yeah, I would say all of my
So
gardens that are in ground started out with a first till. I don't
yeah.
think I've ever done just straight up from grass up, because I mean, like Charles Dowding, who you mentioned in the notes also, he's pretty famous for that, just laying the cardboard down on the grass and
Yep.
start building up your garden from there, and that works great. I've actually never done that. I think every time I've done an in-ground garden, I've tilled first, and then I've no tilled beyond that, and I've just started building it up with cardboard and and
Mhm.
layering and putting down the compost and whatnot after that.
I have
But
never used the cardboard method, but I'm going to be trying
I
it.
I did, yeah, the whole garden over in my newer property, I did. I tilled it the first year, and I just planted straight in the ground from tilling. And then the second year, I just put cardboard down over that, and then put some compost on it. Got it good and wet, put compost on it. I mean, I'm talking like several inches of compost, like 8, 9, 10 inches of compost. And then I let it sit. Like I did that at the end of the year, like in the fall, let it sit
Okay,
all winter, and then it was perfect for planting in
nice.
come spring. So I've done that for the last 2 years, I think, in that garden. So, but
Yeah, I did a mix of, and I'm gonna mention it later too. I did a mix of square foot gardening using Mel's mix, and and then I did several double dug beds. But I was also 20 years younger than we moved here when we
well, I
moved here.
and I'll say this too, you can collect boxes, and I know it's cheap just to get free boxes and stuff, but that's a lot of work to tear all them labels off and all that tape
Yeah.
off and laying all that down. 2 years ago, I bought this big roll of cardboard, like when you roll it
Oh,
out, and it wasn't really that expensive, and it did my whole garden for 2 years.
nice.
And I just rolled it out, cut it off the squares of the beds and just a couple layers of it, and it worked good, and it was, like I said, it was an expense, but I didn't have to go through all that trouble, and, your time is money. I mean, it really is. If you can afford it, and and if it's gonna save you a ton of time, and you don't have a lot of time, and it's okay to do things like that. Again, that's what we're talking about, first year gardening, getting overwhelmed. If you want to overwhelm yourself, give yourself a lot of work to do. you know
Yeah.
if you can make it easier, and you can afford a little bit of things to make it a little bit easier, it will make things, you won't get overwhelmed as easy, and it will make things better for sure, and things like that can definitely
Yes.
make it easier.
Well, and that's why, I mean, we're mentioning these so people, because there's going to be links in the show notes and below in the YouTube channel. But you already mentioned Charles Downing. He does compost, but he puts it right on top of the soil on top of cardboard, and that's how he does it. And he has beautiful gardens,
Hmm.
and and then you can do raised bed, which is what Mel Bartholomew. Yeah, I said that wrong.
Bartholomew.
Bartholomew does with his square foot gardening, which is kind of my gateway into gardening, was square
Hmm.
foot gardening.
Me too, I think.
And you can get that book at probably any library because it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and his method was basically raised beds, and then you make it. They called it Mel's mix, but you don't even have to use a raised bed for that. You could just mound it up and do something like that. His mix was kind of where you got a lot of the growth. And then I like lasagna method too, which is I all of these have videos, but that is more of a method where you just use a bunch of different materials like leaves and cardboard and grass clippings and
And it can be
compost.
kind of in combination as a no-till garden.
Yeah.
To me, there's a lot of similarities, although
Yep.
you might have a couple different layers, um,
Yep.
in a
So there,
lasagna garden. Yeah.
yeah. And then of course you can have your traditional garden where you do till and have rows.
Mhm. Probably the easiest, to be
It
honest.
probably is. And if
Yeah.
and that's if you have access to a tiller. Um no till is nice because you need basically what? A shovel and garden fork and
Yeah.
I don't know. But,
Uh,
if you have access to a tiller and you wanna start that way, there's people that grow beautiful gardens and have wonderful results with just
just to kinda
tilling.
tell you what I did, and when I got this I held off when I got the property next door, and I had this big, beautiful front yard, all grass, and I put off for, like, 2 years planting anything in that property because I didn't really have the money to because I wanted to put all raised beds over there, all right? And I'm like, "But it's expensive, if you're gonna put
Yeah,
in 15, 16 raised beds, a couple boards high, it costs a lot of money to bring in all that material, all the soil, fill them all up." So I kept putting it off. Thought, well, I'll just do it next year, when I got more money. Well, finally, I just said, you know what? Let's just get this done. So I went, and I don't even own a rototiller. I went and rented from a
yep.
tool rental place a really big, nice rototiller. And I went back and forth in that yard. And I got that ground just beautiful. I mean, I just tilled it to where it was just really fine and really good, chopped up good. Went back and forth over it several times. But what I wanted to do, I didn't want traditional rows. I wanted these sectioned off like 4x8 beds. So what I did was I went ahead and rototilled it all. But then I went in and kind of marked my beds, made my 2-foot pathways, 18-inch pathways in between each bed and down the middle. And then I just shoveled all that loose dirt into the beds, raised them up a little bit, bordered them with rocks, filled the pathways in with mulch. And then I had this nice squared off mulch pathways, four
Yep.
by eight beds, the entire yard like that. And
Well,
it
and
worked great.
that's what's nice about tilling because you're using the soil that's there. All these other
Hmm.
methods, you have to somehow get compost. You either make it yourself or you buy it. Um, And that's, I think, why people a lot of times start with or stay with it because it's definitely affordable to just plant
Yeah.
in the dirt you in the ground that you have.
Yep. The world's made out of it. Just
Yep, I mean,
just
it's
turn it
it's
over and
just an
plant in it.
easy
Yeah.
button,
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
yeah, so because any of these others, you definitely invest in some things, and, because the next one I was gonna talk about was container gardening, same thing, you have to fill those containers with something,
Mhm.
and, um so that's why I think a lot of people end up doing your traditional tilled row gardens.
And they
So
can be productive. They can be very productive.
they can. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that monoculture, does long rows of the same thing works. It's just it's easier to plant, it's easier to harvest,
Mhm.
you know, in the end, I don't feel like it's quite as productive as this intense
Yeah.
method of, filling in the beds and, Mel's, Mel Bartholomew's method of square foot gardening where you're really growing
It's yeah,
intense.
intensively, yeah.
Yeah, and it works well, but it's
Yeah.
still it's easy. It's easier to grow in those long rows in some ways,
Yeah,
and it
in
works
some ways
well.
it is easier.
Yeah.
Um, so, you're gonna have to decide and then decide what level of complication you wanna have and how far you wanna start. I mean, yeah. So then there's permaculture, which is what you and I both love, and that is a very wide and broad subject, and I put some videos in for people to help them understand, but I love the idea of something called hugel mounds, um, because you get a lot of surface area and so you have a bed that's like you said yours, I think you said yours are 2 foot by 4 foot?
4 foot by 8 foot,
4 foot by
actually.
8 foot,
Yeah.
but you also get that vertical because there's a
Mhm.
hill, so you get all of that surface area, and they fill it with woody materials and stuff like that. It's a long, complicated subject. but it's really not overly hard to
I'll,
do,
I'll
and
drop a
there's
I'll drop
videos.
a link of a blog post I have on where I go into all the details on how to build it from
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the
and there's
ground up.
there's
Yeah,
videos, I mean, David the Good has a video on how to start a food forest, and I found some Hugel um, articles on permaculture.com. And, and of course, there's always Jeff Lawton's videos. So I put all those videos if people want to get into that. But, in the end, like you and I were talking about before the podcast started, sometimes you just want to push the easy button.
I think
And
if you're a first time gardener,
I
it's
suggest
real
it,
easy.
honestly.
Yeah, it's easy to
Yeah.
get too deep into it. Just do everything you can to keep it as simple as possible the first
Yep.
year. Add and learn and grow slowly. I think part of what does that, we've been talking about soil and setting the garden up and evaluation and those kind of things, but it's also think about what you're going to grow. Starting small, selecting
Yeah.
your vegetables, growing easy stuff the first year. I mean, it can just change your whole attitude about gardening, because if you overcomplicate it and you
Yeah.
have failure, then it's real easy to just feel overwhelmed. Like, I'm not a good gardener, and then this is
Right.
never going
I have a
to work.
black thumb and it's
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
And
I
I have
mean, and
things
don't go
size.
buy the whole seed catalog and plant the whole
Right.
seed catalog, just pick a
Yeah.
few things
Grow some
and start
lettuce, grow some
small.
cherry tomatoes, grow some
Yes.
radishes. I mean, I have easy time growing radishes. You say you don't have, they're a little harder for you to grow, but
I don't know.
here, I mean, you could not make them grow.
Right,
Cucumbers
yeah.
aren't bad. Even peppers and beans, zucchini. I mean,
Oh,
everybody knows about the success
zucchini,
of zucchini.
tomatoes, I
I
mean, those
mean,
are just yeah, it's the pick the stuff well, pick what you eat, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
pick stuff that is a little bit easier, and you could even go and get seedlings instead of starting from
exactly.
seed. And
Exactly, and I would recommend that early on. I
yes,
mean, it's fun. You might try a few things. I mean, obviously, you're gonna grow your lettuce from seed and, a few things like that,
your
but, you know,
zucchini, yeah,
go get your tomato plants and go get your pepper plants the first year, and just so you'll get that nice head start. You're gonna have more success. You're gonna feel better about your garden, and you know what? Feeling successful can carry you a long ways.
yes, yes.
Yeah,
Because you
if you
don't
feel
I mean, if you get
overwhelmed. Yeah,
overwhelmed and then you let it get weedy and you don't take care of it,
yeah,
um, that's discouraging. It's
yeah,
discouraging,
yeah,
and
so
we want everybody to be successful.
and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, of course, I support anybody who goes out there and collects their seeds and
Yeah,
starts in January planting their own stuff. And that's all fun. That's all great. But, you know, if it can be overwhelming. It can if you're new to it. And
yeah,
especially with seedlings, because you're going to get this beautiful tray of little seedlings. And then it's going to come time to put them in the soil, but you forget about the hardening off process, or maybe you don't really know how that really
yeah,
works real well, and then you just killed your entire tray of seedlings. That
yeah.
can feel overwhelming the first year. I mean, that feels overwhelming now when that happens to me, because it does happen to me
Oh,
still
yeah, it's
sometimes.
happened to me too, yes.
Yeah. So it's just,
Yeah,
don't.
and so they have done all that work for you. When you go to wherever it
Mhm.
is you go to get your seedlings, they've done all that work for you, and you can literally take that little seed pod that you bought at the store and plop it into your garden, and boom, there you
Yeah.
go.
And, so yeah, get you some nice healthy plants growing. You can go to the Walmart and buy them. They got some decent
Yep.
plants there. They will produce some nice tomatoes for you, some nice peppers for you. You know, if you really want to get a jump start, they even sell the bigger ones that are really advanced. You might only be just waiting a few weeks and you're going to have fruit, you're going to have things you can eat. And, that's great. It's a great way to start and feel successful. But again, as we have a comment mentioning it, start with foods that you like to eat, and I think
Yeah,
that's important. I think that's a great, we mentioned that you just definitely want to plant things that you will eat. I mean, you can plant, if you don't like eggplant, don't go out there and plant a dozen
right,
eggplants. You're not
exactly.
going to eat them and you're not going to feel great about it. Um, Zucchini. I know a lot of people who grow a lot of zucchini and don't even eat zucchini. It's like, why? Well, they just feel successful growing it, I guess, because they like having these big giant zucchinis that they can pass out to all their neighbors and make enemies from them. But
Sneak into their
um,
cars.
yeah, yeah, you don't want to leave a window open in your car in the middle of summer with zucchini gardener around. They'll fill it up. Um,
Right.
but there's a lot to that, but there's also maintaining the garden.
Mhm.
It's not just about getting started, it's about maintaining, and it's about weeding. Weeding can feel overwhelming if you let it get ahead of you. Um, feeding your garden. You have some compost. Now, you can make your own compost. I recommend everybody start making their own compost. But your first
Right.
year, don't feel bad about buying some compost. Don't ever
Yeah.
feel bad about it, no matter how far along you are. But I'm just saying, don't think just, if your first year, don't think I have to do everything myself. It's okay to go buy some compost, feed your plants, and,
Yes.
you know, get some wood chips and keep that in your pathways. And you can even use that in your garden beds to suppress weeds, and it will do
Yeah.
a good job. Um,
Slow
uh,
and steady, slow and steady.
yeah, exactly. And compost will definitely help your plants grow better, look better. They will help fight off disease. If you got healthy
Mhm.
plants, they won't be as um, they won't be as apt to get disease or pest pressure, because healthy plants do not
Yes.
attract pests like weak plants do. Weak plants will, I've seen it so many times in my garden. You got this plant that looks like it's not doing very well, and you got a bunch of healthy plants around it, and you will see like the aphids attacking that bad plant, but
Mhm.
none of the others. It just works that way. It's kind of weird. It's because it just puts off a certain, flavor to them, a taste to them, and they just go for it. Um,
Yeah.
I do recommend making like compost tea. I'm a fan of compost tea. I make a lot of it. I put it on my garden. It works great. It's easy to do. And it'll give your garden a nice little boost.
Yeah,
Um,
we had somebody comment, it says, "Start with just a few things and add to it each year as you gain knowledge and confidence." And that's
Absolutely.
exactly perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Make it as easy as you can the first year, and then just
Yep.
gradually, and it'll just feel
That easy
easy as you
button.
grow. You know,
Yep.
in other words, don't be like me, and do too much every year and overwhelm yourself.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
I do the same thing. And so that's one of the things, you're gonna wanna find source some compost if you don't have it going already. I mean, some people have compost and I guess don't have a garden, but, I think most people start with their garden first before they develop compost piles. So find
Mhm.
somewhere that you can get your compost and, yeah, and
Yeah.
materials, finding sourcing materials for if you decide to do a raised bed or the chips. There's some places sometimes you can get free wood chips. I've never
Yeah.
had success with it
Uh,
here, but some
uh-huh.
people have.
Yeah. One time I got hold of a tree trimming company, and they got me a couple loads, but yeah, mostly I've had to, purchase actually some wood chips if
Yep,
I wanted them. I actually make a lot of my own wood chips because I have a wood chipper, and every year I'm pruning a bunch of trees. It's amazing how much you have to prune and run through a wood chipper to get a decent pile of wood chips, though. It's amazing how
it
it's like
is, yeah,
you will think you are feeding, these big giant brush piles to this thing, and you end up with this little tiny pile of wood chips at the end of it. It's like, how'd that happen?
exactly. So and that's why we're saying, like, just the easy button of finding somewhere to buy stuff because it is once you get as deep and closed loop as we're trying to be, it definitely gets a little bit more complicated, a lot more time invested. So, yeah, the other thing you might want to consider too as you're doing your garden, is consider the pests that you might have. It depends on
Mhm.
where you're at. Some people are going to have a ton of deer pressure. Some people, their biggest issue is going to be the neighborhood cats coming in and using their garden as a litter box. So, you might want to think about that a little bit and think it through and how you can protect your time and investment.
Yeah, honestly, having any kind of dog, even just a pet dog that runs the property, can really do a lot
Usually
for you
helps
there.
a lot.
For
Yep.
years, we just had little dogs, and they'll prevent a lot of things, a lot of problems like raccoons and all kinds of
Mhm.
stuff. They'll keep it out cats. They'll take care of all that kind of stuff, keep it away from the garden, which is great. Unless
Yep.
you have a dog that tears up your garden just as much as one of those animals do, which I've had a couple of those. Oh, I think another thing to consider too that can feel overwhelming. Of course, we're talking about feeding the garden. We're talking about, with compost. We're talking about, maintaining as far as protecting your garden, but we also watering can be overwhelming. Like, how much do you water a garden?
True.
And a lot of people
True.
really wrestle with that. It's like, and I think that, if you're not getting at least a one good soaking rain a week, you're probably gonna have to water your garden. And it's better to water long and deep than watering frequently. Like, in other
Yes.
words, don't
Yes.
water every day, but like every 3 or 4 days, water really heavily. and that's actually
Yeah.
better. It promotes those roots to go. It makes those roots want to go deeper and be healthier. Where
Yeah, and
shallow
it also
watering, yeah,
allows the leaves and stuff to dry off so you don't end up with some
disease.
moisture diseases.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You'll get
um,
like
and that can be solved with knowing how much. You could just a sprinkler and a dollar store, rain gauge will
hmm
help you out there a lot.
can
So,
sure. Or you can use your finger and stick it in the ground,
that too.
and honestly, it's like 2 or 3 inches down, you should start feeling some moist soil, and when that's dry, it's time to water. That's a good little detection there. Just, I mean, that's how I generally
Mhm.
just do it, with just check it with your finger, right? So, you know, uh, there's a lot of things to consider. How early to start gardening, definitely want to
Yeah.
um,
Well,
look for
one
your
thing we didn't
zones.
mention too, yeah, you were
Yeah,
just mentioning it, zones, like where
yeah,
your location is,
your
where you
growing
are.
zones.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
when your first frost and your last frost is, and then in your grow zones, because there's certain things that are, you don't wanna put things out there and then have them all freeze.
yeah. We've got a couple comments here. This person says their neighbor gives them their chicken manure, and I spread it around the wood chips and on the ground where I didn't plant. Uh, but plan to. Yeah, that's
Oh, yeah.
important, chicken
Yeah.
manure, because it's hot manure, and if you put it on a plant that you're growing, around your plant you're growing, it can actually burn it. Nitrogen can actually burn your plant and kill your plant, or really injure it. And their other neighbor has horse manure that's aged, and that
Nice.
that works really well too. That's good. Yeah, that's some great way to feed your garden. Now I will put it out there that you have to be kind of careful. You want to know what the animal's eating, because there are some hays that, like graze on. They have been
Oh,
sprayed with, like, a graze
yes.
on or
Yeah.
something like that, and they will pass right through an animal and come into the manure and will actually kill your garden, if
Yeah, they
that
had
gets
a
on your
big
garden.
issue with that a few years ago, I remember.
Yeah, 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 and I think it's still an issue in some
Is
places.
it?
Yeah, I think so. And they also said that when they put, wood chips down, their plants grew like crazy. They didn't dry out much, at all after that. Yeah, it can really help,
Oh,
retain
it does
moisture
a
in the
lot.
soil, because the sun's not beating down on that. Nature hates bare soil, and you should too, because it again, weeds grow easier on bare soil. The bare soil dries out a lot faster, and so if you can keep that soil covered, and you should keep it covered with something, then now me, I grow so intense in my garden beds. I mean, everything is so close together that once you get past the seedling stage, everything's just covering the soil anyway. There's hardly any, you can't see any soil, so I don't really have to put wood chips down. It's great though when you have seedlings to put it between the rows of the seedlings, because it really does help, retain that moisture, um, really, really well. And a lot of things will pop right up through wood chips too. I mean, you might
Yeah.
have to if you run a pretty deep wood chip method, you do have to pull a little bit away to get things to grow, but once they get
Yeah.
so high, you can kinda push the wood chips back around. Works great.
Yeah,
Um,
we didn't when we first put in our orchard, and it's basically, I'm talking about ground cover here, not about fruit trees, but we heavily mulched a few trees, but we didn't have enough to mulch some other trees, and it is amazing how much better those trees did in the
mhm.
drought, even though they all got watered regularly. And we just used whatever we could find. We pulled leaves from the forest and bark from the forest, but covering that ground, it just helps keep it from evaporating. So if
Yeah,
you can put some cover on the soil underneath your plants, it definitely helps. And it helps build soil, and the worms love it, and
mhm.
yada
On that
yada.
note, I like planting comfrey around my trees because it has those big
Yes.
giant leaves, and it just shades the soil so good and feeds the soil and does a great job. But you could do that with lots of things. See, we have a comment that says they like to use clover, as an edible ground cover for their walkways. I think it's great. Yeah, if you could, it's perfect if you can do that, and especially if you use like a white clover that's a little bit lower to the ground than a red clover,
So pretty.
that gets a little taller. But even if you use that, you could just run a lawnmower down it and chop it up, spread it into your garden, throw it into your garden, and have it fertilize your garden while you're doing it.
Right?
It works great. Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean,
good stuff.
bottom line is just don't overcomplicate it the first couple of years while you're learning. Just start
Yeah.
slow.
I just seeing these comments that are coming in, it makes me think of something else. I also think as a first beginner gardener, it's so good to be part of a community. that can
Yeah.
answer things like this and there's so much good advice coming in here. And if you're part of a good, even online community, or especially, and if you can
Mhm.
find a local community, it's even better. But there are so many people that's been doing it for so long that they can just give you so much good advice, and they can help you. They can talk you through problems, and if something's not looking right or you're having trouble, with something. So many people have so much to offer. And one thing I know about homesteaders, gardeners, they're just generous with information. They love to help you grow the best garden you can grow. So be part of something like that. Be part of a group. You can be part of
Yeah.
our Homestead Front Porch Facebook group. That's a great place to be. There's lots of people in there giving great advice. But I mean, just looking at these comments makes me think about that.
Yeah.
Nobody knows it all, but as a community, we know a lot more. No doubt about it.
Right. Well, and I also think about this, if you are listening to this and you're just dreaming about gardening, um, I did do 2 years at a community garden, and there's many places that offer those, and the nice part about those is even if you do have a backyard, but you don't know how to start, is you have people there that are avid gardeners. Ours actually had access to a master gardener, so you can learn a lot by doing something like that or joining a
Mhm.
community garden or joining a gardening group locally. It doesn't
Mhm.
just have to be online. So, there's a lot to be learned. One of the ways I also learned was by finding gardeners or farms nearby and just volunteering to help weed, and it is
Yeah.
amazing how much you learn that just being
Being
present.
around it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
there's ways to learn and get your feet wet with this stuff.
And
And,
I kind of want to go back a little bit and talk about the overwhelm factor again. So many people I've met when they start planting their garden, they kind of figure out, okay, how do we feed ourselves 100%? And
yes.
they plant so much that first year, and then harvest season comes around, and they realize how much work that is. And I think it's a great goal to have, but I also think scale back at first,
Mhm.
see where you're at, evaluate, add to it as you've learned and grow and get better at it. And don't try to grow every single thing you'll eat the first year because it might be overwhelming,
Yeah.
and you'll realize that first harvest
Yep.
season. I know one year I grew so many tomatoes. I planted so
Mhm.
many tomatoes,
I
and
think
it was
we've
like,
all done this.
and it's like, what was I thinking? I mean, I had tomatoes just, I didn't even know what to do with them all. I'm giving them away as much as I could. Half of them are ending
Yep.
up in the compost because I had so many. I've done that with so many different things, but just scale back, especially your
Yeah.
first time. Scale back. You don't have to grow everything you're going to eat the first year you start growing.
Yeah.
It can be so overwhelming.
Yeah,
So,
you could start with 1 small bed and a tomato plant or 2 tomato plants and some green beans and a squash plant, and that's fine.
the the first 2 beds I ever grew, I called one my salsa bed, and I called the other one my salad bed.
There you
And I
go.
grew things in there to make salsa, and I grew things to eat a salad in 2 different
Well, and
beds, and
that
that was
reminds
perfect
me, I
for me.
know a lot of people that grow if you wanna do this with kids as an experiment and you all learn as a family, I know a lot of people that grow a pizza garden. So they'll
Yeah,
grow a tomato and
makes
some
it fun.
basil and some
Absolutely.
onions. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
just make it fun, and I think that's
make it
important.
fun, keep it
Enjoy
simple.
enjoy the fruits of your labor. If it's not enjoyable, it's hardly worth doing, right? You might as well just go buy the produce from somebody else that enjoys doing it if you don't enjoy doing it. But make it
Exactly.
fun, you know, work on, growing things that you'll love to eat, your kids will love to eat, whatever. Things you love to cook, grill, salads you like to make, snacks you like to make. Um,
Yep.
and then think about preserving too. If you plan on getting into preserving, plant stuff that preserves well, freezes well, cans good, dries well, if you want to do all those things, but share your harvest too, plant enough
Ah,
maybe to where
yeah.
you like to share with people, because that's fun. It is fun to share what you're growing and, just get other people involved and maybe even give them a love for homegrown food because it is different. It's not like the store for sure.
No, I mean, after you eat your first homegrown tomato, you probably will want to grow more.
Yeah. I
If you've been
Believe it
getting
or
them at
not,
the store anyway.
I actually find this kind of important too, and I used to didn't think so, but the longer I've done it, I think about like my old gardens and pictures pop up and things, but I feel like doing a garden journal and even taking
Yeah,
photographs, doing like Instagram and just taking pictures of your garden and sharing them because it's very inspirational, for yourself and for others. And I love when an old picture pops up or I look back through my old pictures and I see like where my garden was at this time 4 years
yeah,
ago or whatever. And what I usually find out is sometimes you think you're not doing all that well with your garden, but you're doing so much better than you were 4 years ago and don't even realize
right?
it, you
Yeah,
know? And I see that in the pictures. Like I'll also go back and look at old pictures and I'm like, oh man, that's all I had going on then, and look what I got going on now. And that keeps you going. I mean, it's motivational. It really helps you.
it is, it is.
It helps you realize that you are making progress, even when
Yeah,
you
and
think maybe you're not.
we have another comment, and I love this idea too. They say, "My neighbors don't garden, but they contribute to my garden, so I give them things from the garden, and everyone's happy."
Absolutely.
And I love
Yeah.
that. You could do a
Yeah.
neighborhood garden, or your neighbors could just help, and you could just give them some produce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
love
think that's a
that.
great idea. Great idea. And in all this, in you'll do your first year and then you plan for the next season,
Yep.
and then you will want to probably add a few things or change a few things. You'll probably want to save a few seeds. You're probably going to want to do things a little bit different. And every year that'll happen every year. And you'll grow as a gardener. And
Yeah.
just don't beat yourself up that first year or two because it's easy to do and think you're not a successful gardener. But everybody goes through that. No, nobody starts off
Well,
doing
even
great.
seasoned gardeners, you and I have been gardening for a long time, and we still kill things. I kill
You're going to
so
have
many
bad
plants.
years
I
too.
just I just have learned to plant twice as much or start just twice as much as what I really want because I still kill stuff.
Yeah, I've gardened for several years and then I got a major bug infestation, something just crazy
Yep.
came in, or I got, some kind of a, blight hit me like it never hit me before, or we just had this crazy droughts a couple years in a row. And I don't care how good a gardener you are, gardens don't grow without rain very well,
No, they
So,
do not. Yep,
I mean, things are going to happen and that's just the way it is.
it
And
is.
it's fine. You just have to just go with the flow. And every year is kind of like you get to start over, do it again, and then try better and change a few things and just grow as a gardener. And it's fun. It can be a lot of fun, but it won't be fun if you overwhelm yourself. It will not
It
be fun.
certainly will not, and I have
Yeah.
done that to myself multiple times, and, it is wise words when you say that because don't overwhelm yourself. You will it's all gotta get harvested too. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yep.
Well, let's just quickly go through a few of the resources that we mentioned that you mentioned a few videos, people to follow and some books even. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
if you
So
want to mention a few of those.
we have, Grow Biointensive I'm trying to remember his name. Maybe I'll think of it at the end, but we have Jesse Frost. He has a great YouTube channel, and he has a book. Um
All the links will be in the show notes when this
Yep,
is
all
over
the
too.
links will be in the show notes. I can't remember the name of his book at the time
The
moment.
Living Soil Handbook.
Yes, and it is I love his book because it is written for the beginner, and I
Mhm.
really like that.
It's a great book.
Charles Dowding, he has he has a YouTube channel, but he also has a website, and his website actually has a beginner's guide that's free. He has some
And don't feel bad if your garden doesn't look as good as his, because nobody's does.
nobody's does. He's got a beautiful garden,
Yeah,
and,
he does.
he also has several books on
Mhm.
Amazon. And then you have, of course, Square Foot Gardening, Mel Bartholomew. He's
Yep.
got a book and there's some YouTube channels. He has passed away, so some of these YouTubes of him are older. There's, I think that's, well, David the Good, does he have any books out? He's got a
Oh,
website,
yeah, he's
or,
got several books. I have a
he's got a
couple of his
YouTube
books.
out.
He's
Yep.
got some books. Yeah.
And then you have Jeff Lawton, who has a great YouTube channel. I actually also linked to Jack Spearco has a great introduction to permaculture series. It's quite old. It's like 12 years old, but it's still good and helps you understand what permaculture is if you're interested in that. So that's what
Yeah.
I have. I don't know if you have anything to add to it.
Those I mean, definitely, I would have had Mel Bartholomew in there as he's just a great
Yeah.
resource for beginning. I actually like a book, if you're interested in companion planting and all, I love this book called Plant
Yes.
Partners, and I really like it. It's Plant Partners Science-Based Companion Planting. I think it's, if you're thinking along the lines of planting things that grow well together or things that complement each other by maybe preventing insects or things like that, and trap crops,
Mhm.
all kinds of things like that. It's just, I think it's a great little resource. If there's so many great resources, so many great
There
books. I mean,
is,
look
there
look at
is.
my bookshelves back here. I mean, I have so many books on different things, but I mean,
Yeah, and
we could list several dozen
it
books of
just
things.
depends on how you learn. Some
Yeah.
people learn best by reading a book, some people learn by, a video on YouTube. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, anyway, well, I hope what we've done is maybe just inspired you to get started gardening,
Yeah, just start.
but also maybe put the brakes on you a little bit and
Mhm.
calmed you down a little bit, not made you want to take on too much, and maybe giving you a few ideas to where you can have a successful first year garden. Because I think having a great first year garden, having a successful, feeling good about it, having a lot of success will
Yes.
just push you forward. Because I think it'd be really easy to be so overwhelmed your first year that you don't ever want to do it again, and that's
Yeah.
what we don't want. So, um, because it could, I think it's a possibility. I mean, I hear of a lot of homesteaders beyond gardening, just homesteaders who start homesteading and they give up really quick because it's just not what they thought it would be.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
it's mostly because they take on too much and try to do too much uh, quickly, and so just
I would never do that.
yeah, I've overwhelmed myself probably every year with something. So
I think most years I start out eating an elephant, so, yes.
yeah, I get so excited, and it's easy to do that you take on too much, and
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, you get that Baker Creek catalog in the mail, and it's beautiful.
they got us. They know how to get us. They know how to get us for
Yes.
sure. So, well, folks, I hope that you found it helpful and inspiring, and you'll get started gardening because we love to see people growing their own food. I think it's one of the best things you can do, and I think it's just it'll change your life if you really get into it. I think it's just really exciting and a lot of fun and really
Yeah.
healthy for you. And there's 100 other reasons that I think homesteading is great, but it kind of starts with a garden most of the time. So get out there and
Most of
get
the
started
time, yep.
gardening. Yeah,
Maybe just a tomato.
that's right. Get started with something. And folks, until next week, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.